Hi, my name is Ashley, and today our group will be discussing the main differences between the films The Wave, The Impossible, and Deepwater Horizon. Thank you, and stick
Hi
around.
guys, my name is Rajni Tam, and today my group and I are going to talk about real life film versus fictional film. Deepwater Horizon is an American disaster film based on the Deepwater Horizon explosion and oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, which happened back in April of 2010. This film was based on a true story. It is adapted from the New York Times article Deepwater Horizon's Final Hours, which was published in December of 2010. Based on reviews and film critics, this movie is considered pretty good as a film that's based on true events. However, the Washington Post has other opinion. They said that Deepwater Horizon movie gets the facts mostly right but simplifies the blame. This movie mostly focuses on pre-disaster, as in telling the audience what went wrong and how it led to the explosion, but it does not indicate the outcomes of those who caused the accident. The pre-impact part took about 15 minutes of the film, while the disaster itself took approximately 40 minutes, and the aftermath was only around 10 minutes. The main characters are Mike Williams, Mr. Jimmy, Donald, Andrea, Caleb, Felicia, Jason, and Robert. Terror management theory, based on what we saw in movies that were based on or inspired by true stories, we noticed that the main characters in every single one of them are a group of people with family and kids. So that kind of gives off the idea from the beginning of the movie that these characters would want to survive the disaster for their kids. This is them coping with mortality by devoting their energy to leaving a legacy that could make them immortal, just like what it says in the article from Psychology Today. There were a total of 11 deaths in this movie, including the entire drill team members. This film really focuses on the love between Mike Williams and his wife Felicia Williams. From the start of the movie, when the family of three were home enjoying their morning together before Mike headed off to Deepwater Horizon, to when he got there, the two still FaceTime each other as much as they can. Even during the disaster, the film only shows Felicia making calls, trying to find out any updates. It did not show how other families of other crew members expressed their concerns. There's this one scene in the movie that really portrays the internal and external locus of control of the character. Mike and Andrea were the only two people left on the rig. When Mike located the emergency life raft, it was already separated from the rig, but he decided to jump anyway, knowing that he's going to go through the fire if he jumps. That is internal locus of control. On the other hand, Andrea refuses to jump as she is scared of dying and has already given up. This shows external locus of control. But Mike convinces her otherwise by telling her how it will be like when they get out of here. He told her that she's going to get her car fixed and possibly even get a brand new one. So, this can also be considered as a form of terror management theory that Mike places on Andrea. For the pattern of misrepresentation in this film, we notice that there's a pattern of underrepresentation of females, as Andrea was the only female working there among other men. What I like about this movie is that they spend a lot of time trying to show the cause of the disaster by focusing on the work of most of the crew members. And what I did not like is that the movie seemed to only put the blame on two crew members. Donald and Robert were the only two people prosecuted for their actions. Both were charged with 11 cases of manslaughter. And if there's one thing I would change about this movie is that they should do more investigation and also blame it on the workers who were assigned to test the integrity of recently completed cement work. They were sent home early without conducting a cement bond log.
Hi, my name is Kirti Nandi, and I'll be discussing more about how real movies versus inspired by movies are affected. The movie I'll be discussing is called The Wave, and it focuses on a Norwegian family and how they survive during a tsunami that's caused by a landslide. This film is inspired by a real event that did happen in Norway called the Tufjord tsunami and consists of fictional characters which were made up. This movie consists of four main characters: Christian, Aiden, Sondre and Julia, whose names I probably butchered. The central differences between the three movies were character depth, special effects, and the need for realism. In The Wave, all the characters were developed well and the audience could differentiate who was who based on personality. Christian was a geologist slash scientist who got a new job and was moving away with his family. Aiden was a hard-working hotel manager. Sondre loved listening to music and skateboarding. Julia was a young and innocent girl who loved her family a lot. In The Impossible, there wasn't much character depth. We knew a little bit about the mother Maria and her son Lucas, but not much about the others. I couldn't even tell the difference between the two youngest siblings because they looked so much alike and didn't have any differentiating qualities. In Deep in the Horizon, the characters were developed well as they spent most of the movie building up to the actual disaster. We had more time to get to know the characters and their personalities like in The Wave. Another central difference was the use of special effects. In The Wave and The Impossible, the special effects seemed a bit exaggerated and dramatic to make the point of showing such a horrific disaster and the effect it can have. But according to an article by The Guardian, The Impossible was extremely detailed and showed the tsunami realistically. They even made a point of how the hospital chairs were the exact same. In the Deep in the Horizon film, they used special effects pretty realistically and didn't make it seem too fake. The special effects in this movie seem scary. The last central difference is the need for realism, which ties into the special effects. In The Wave, everything seems pretty realistic as they showed how the underwater ground levels were different than before, and the scientists investigated what was to come. The only thing that wasn't realistic was that there was only one wave that hit. In real life, as we learned in Dr. Isavich's class, there are multiple waves that hit during a tsunami. In The Impossible, the movie was pretty realistic as well, other than the fact that they didn't emphasize the effect the disaster had on Indonesian lives. They only focused on the white tourists and their experience. In the Deep in Horizon film, the use of realism was good, except for they didn't focus on who's responsible for the disaster. They showed us what really happened during the disaster, but not who or what was responsible. It is important to make movies realistic, as according to the article titled "Are Movies Based on True Stories Better Than Fictional Stories?", which is currently on the site Stephen Follows, they discuss how audiences tend to like true stories due to how they can relate to it. It is important to make them as realistic as possible in order for audiences to be able to relate and to make it realistic. Terror management theory was shown in two main ways in The Wave. The idea of continuing the legacy was shown through Christian saving his daughter Julia. Christian uses terror management theory by trying to preserve his legacy. He helps Julia run up the mountain before the tsunami hits while he goes on to help Anna, his neighbor. Although he's risking his life, he still tries to save his legacy. In the same way, his wife Aiden preserves her legacy by giving up her seat in the bus to safety. She instead goes to find Sondre, who is skateboarding in the basement, and helps him survive in risk of losing her own life. The locus of control theory involves two types, which are internal and external. Many people, including the main characters, appear to be focusing on their internal locus control because they believe that their own actions will help them survive by trying to get to safety. External locus of control is used toward the end of the movie, where Aiden and Sondre are trying to revive Christian. As they're trying to bring him back to life with no success, Sondre tries one last time with not much hope, but it appears to be out of luck, in which Christian survives. I like the acting in this film and how they showed what happened after the disaster. The part when Christian goes to search for Aiden and Sondre kept me on the edge of my seat. I disliked how much focus they put on what happened before the disaster. Although it was important for showing what caused the disaster, they didn't do a good job of making it interesting, and I found it to be pretty boring. In the based on and inspired by films, they did a similar job in showing the terror management theory and locus control theory. If anything, it was more emphasized in the based on movies because they were portraying real emotions that were felt, and they could have a point that they could go back on by comparing the real life characters with the characters they were showing in the movie. This makes a difference in how we also view movies because it gives us some sort of purpose. For example, we might be more compelled to use anxiety buffers like stepping up and taking care of another family member, like one of the younger brothers did in The Impossible. Or we might be more inclined to preserving our legacy, like in The Wave.
The 2012 film The Impossible revolves around the Bennett family and their survival experiences of the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami. The family was separated during this disaster, and the main protagonist, Maria, was injured so harshly she almost fallen dead to her injuries. Plot A revolves around Maria and Lucas looking for survival and any possibility of their family being alive, while plot B revolves around Henry and the two young sons looking for their mom and the older son. The family was separated during this disaster. The characters are the Bennett family, which consists of the mother Maria, husband Henry, and the three sons, eldest Lucas, Thomas, and the youngest Simon. They were on Christmas vacation in Thailand when the tsunami hit, and this was based on a true family who did survive this disaster and were able to be reunited. We enjoyed how accurate the film was to Ballone's experience, since according to Wikipedia and the LA Times article, it mentioned how Maria was asked to help be a screenwriter and a producer for the film, and also she did have a say in selecting the cast portraying her family. The film's duration for the disaster was set either during the disaster or the aftermath of the disaster for the majority of the film, and how the family had coped with the struggles. It was a much more refreshing approach in the disaster films because, according to Haney's article, many disaster films focus solely on before the disaster or during the disaster, but not much during the aftermath. It was also noticed that the characters did go through terror management theory, which my group and I did appreciate. The terror management theory is a theory in which people cope with a certain stress by using a certain mechanism due to anxiety or fear of a disaster that's out of the control of their hands. For example, we do see Lucas, the eldest, using this approach by helping people reunite with their families. What we did dislike about this film was the lack of representation of colored people amongst this film. The 2004 tsunami disaster had caused over 23,000 people losing their lives and loved ones. And also, in addition to that, these people were mostly locals that lived in either India, Thailand, Indonesia, Laos, Thailand, etc. And we've noticed that this film fell under the pattern 1, lack of representation of people of color and women of color. In addition to that, the family was originally from Spain and they were Spanish, and their last name was Balón, not Bennett. My group and I discussed it, and the changes that we would make this tsunami a little bit more accurate, scientifically accurate. For example, we would add the earthquake that was felt because the tsunami had a 9.1 earthquake. In addition to that, we would also make it a series of multiple waves rather than just one giant single wave. And we would also have the stories being told of the other people, like the other people who face the exact same situation. For example, the local Indonesian and Thai people who face this same problem, lost their lives. We would also add their stories in too. We selected The Impossible as our favorite movie because not only was it the most accurate with telling the story, but it was also the most realistic in disastrous situations. For example, with the tsunami, we saw the aftermath and how many thousands of lives were destroyed, and how many people were in need of help and rescue, and it showed the destruction of the actual disaster. And also the storyline was quite interesting, and we also enjoyed how the actual family was included in the filmmaking of this film. Thank you.